Welcome back to the discussion bringing clarity to the disruptive chaos of IT modernization, sponsored by SAIC on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. My guest today is Sanjay Sardar, Vice President, Modernization and Digital Transformation, SAIC. I'm your moderator, John Gilroy. Well, it said the word disruptive chaos, and we all know the term from 1995, Clayton Christensen's famous book about disruptive innovation. But not all disruption is good, and some can be very difficult to understand. You may have to have an heavy-duty analysis or analytics to understand the disruption and where it applies. So what role does analytics play in this whole change to modernization?
Well, analytics is a key to everything that we're doing on the modernization side. We're not modernizing just to make systems better. Obviously, we're looking at security and all the other things, but the ability to analyze data and really use that to make better decisions, that's part of this modernization trend. It has to be. So when you look at how much data is a strategic asset. I think the federal government has started to recognize that data is a strategic asset. Commercial companies have been doing this for a long time, but think about how much data is being created in the last half century. We used to talk about petabytes of data. We are way past that now. Now we're into zettabytes of data. And if you think about what a zettabyte is, it's the amount of data that you can store in 30 trillion CDs. And we're talking about creating 160 zettabytes by the year 2025. 30 trillion CDs, I had to look this up, I'll tell you, is the same as if you put them side by side, 240-foot shipping containers. That's that's 1 trillion CDs, just 1 trillion. That's a mile and a half long. 30 of those, that's 45 miles. Altogether 160, that's 7,200 miles of data. That's ridiculous in 2025. How do you analyze that? You can't analyze that with the traditional compute that we have today. So you really have to start looking at high performance compute, parallel processing, cloud platform scalability, all gives us that power to analyze this data to really make better decisions.
So, Sanjay, we have strategic data sitting in federal systems. We know that, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then you read a quote from Tony Scott, and Tony Scott says, former Fed CIO, we all know him, it's estimated that $3 billion in federal technology will at the end of its life in the next 3 years. So you have strategic data sitting in a difficult place. What do? Just lift and shift? Just pick it right up and bring it into the data center? I hope not.
That's an excellent point. I think when you talk about modernizing applications and structures that house this data and that we use for mission critical systems, there's multiple ways of doing it. Lift and shift, that traditional redeploying applications into the cloud platforms, is one way of doing it. It's not necessarily the best way. In the sense of what I'm saying is cloud efficiencies, that's why we're looking to do these things. Pick up on the efficiencies for the cost savings of cloud, the power of cloud. But if you just lift and shift applications and move them into the cloud, you may not be able to harness the power of the cloud. Your applications may not be able to use the processing power that's out there. There's multiple ways to do it. So everything from re-architecting these applications into microservices and then rebuilding them so they're better attuned to using cloud constructs, that's absolutely a good way to do it. Or you also have to look at the cost benefit of potentially replacing them just with as-a-service models or platforms that already exist, COTS platforms that already exist. There was a trend, I just heard this morning, someone talking about 5 years from now, 10 years from now, there might be no such thing as custom apps. They might just all be platforms that people have developed on and all the applications running on that. Not sure if we'll get there, but absolutely have to look at how to modernize. SAIC, that's what we do. We look at a platform across the board. We look at all the applications and really try to understand what is the best way to get you there.
Well, I got a sensitive question for you here, and I don't know if you want to answer it or not. When you look at challenges and obstacles to modernization, sometimes it's the human beings involved saying, hey, look, in my agency here, we're compliant, and if I go to the new system, well, I may not be compliant. Hey, we're happy as we are, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So what about compliance in this challenge, this change?
Compliance, it has a wide variety of things that we're looking at. There's everything from security compliance to be able to meet the mission. So yes, absolutely, compliance is key to what we're doing, but compliance shouldn't be check the box. I think when we look at applications across the board, or when we look at modernizing systems, you really have to understand the mission. You have to understand the mission of the agency when you're making these kind of disruptive changes. Change is complex. There's no doubt about it. Modernization is complex. And we are going to have to infuse these disruptive technologies Because at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to simplify tomorrow, right? We want to make it so we're not in this mess again 3 years, 5 years down the road.
One of the challenges to this modernization, from my perspective, I think, is duplication and redundancy. Now, this is a way where SAIC come in and actually save people money and reduce costs.
Yeah, underlying to everything in the modernization world is good architecture. You got to look at everything at that fundamental level. Understand how things are built. Understand where data flows exist. Understand what data is out there, what's duplicative, as you put it, what's redundant, what's necessary, what's not necessary. When we look at all these things combined, that's when we start seeing, when we talk about app modernization, for example, why do we move apps as a group? Because there's interdependencies, things that work together. When we talk about infrastructure and software-defined infrastructure, when we start putting in automation, we have to understand what the agency mission really is and how best technology can help the agency deliver that mission. If we're not doing that, modernization for its own sake is not worth it.
Yeah, some people say that really modernization means to expand the agency's capability, and that could include scaling, it could include redundancy, it could include app efficiency and cybersecurity as well. So it's all inclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the challenges that we face right now, there are some things that we have to overcome. One of the things is funding. When we look at funding for modernization, the federal government has been very good about buying technology and upgrading. But as you buy technology and you let it sit, it faces this problem of obsolescence. We don't fund to continuously modernize. We have to get over that. We also have this issue of how processes are changing, how things are working. And then finally, we have to look at the reskilling of the workforce.
We're going to pause here for a short break. My guest today is Sanjay Sardar, Vice President, Modernization and Digital Transformation, SAIC. I'm your moderator, John Gilroy, on the discussion, bringing clarity to the disruptive chaos of IT modernization, sponsored by SAIC on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.